Hi, I wanted to do just a quick overview of the early versions of the Hanwei Practical series of katana, which kind of follows up on a couple of themes from my previous videos. One is, the journey of the martial artist from the 70s and 80s looking for a production sword that was, not unbalanced junk, that was reasonably authentic, and also my other theme of tending to focus on stuff that's both that balance of good quality yet affordable, so I'm not afraid to use it and abuse it. And Paul Chen Hanwei were some of the first to come out with an offering that fit the criteria. In the early 2000s, they started showing up in the Practical series and some of the other swords they put out, advertising swords that were made with more traditional geometries. And the early versions, they also, they gave that extra romance of saying that they were made out of, old Chinese railroad steel. Does that make it a better steel? I don't know, but they're actually, the steel is, I can't complain too much about the steel. So I got into the Practical series at the entry level, starting with a $200 basic practical katana, and this is one of the original practical katanas. So they've come out since with some improvements and some different versions. There's an XL that's heavier and beefier for cutting, and then there's a light one that's got a groove in it for maneuverability. But this was one of the first ones. And it was a mixed bag, but they really warned you up front what you were getting into in terms of telling you what was authentic versus non-authentic. And I'm actually pretty happy with it, starting with the handle. The geometry on this handle is it's really good. It's got an 11-inch Tsuka. It's got a nice oval to it and a nice little bit of a taper, a wasting to it. It's wrapped in a very comfortable black suede material that stayed put pretty well. Like I said, I've had this for over 15 years and put it through a lot of hard use. Had no problems with that. The fixtures, the pommel, and the fuchi, the collar at the top of the handle, are really just basic black and bronze. The guard is just this basic round iron-looking Suba. Very plain, but I really like it. Aesthetically, it's very pleasing to me. This really basic guard, I love it. So that was one thing that I really appreciate about the blade. On the cost-cutting end, I was used to, the cheap reproduction swords that had plastic handles and plastic and fake reskin. This has got a wooden handle, and everything's fit really well, and it's actually, it's pinned properly and secured. But it's got these kind of almost rubbery vinyl fake panels that do have seams in them where they're kind of pieced together like jigsaw puzzle pieces, and over the years that glue is yellowed so they become more visible. So that's not the greatest thing, but again, I was warned up front I was not getting authentic material. The scabbard, the saya, is a really basic wood piano lacquer, nothing special about the fixtures. It's okay for what it is. It just is. However, it has cracked on me more than once. It's not really put together very well. There's no real reinforcement in that scabbard mouth, and the bottom of the scabbard's cracked open a few times and needed to be repaired. So not stunned with that, but from my previous videos, remember what I was getting in terms of Spanish-made blades was an aluminum tube with plastic inserts. So this was a lot better. This was at least wood, so that was a good thing. Now, the blade itself is quite surprising. And again, they warned me what I was getting and not getting. One of the interesting things about this blade is it's not very wide. It's got a very narrow profile. Now, it does have a distal taper, so it does start out a little thicker and end up a little thinner. And between those two things, it makes for an extremely lively, well-balanced sword compared, you put the handle in that equation. And I just really love the way this sword handles. Now, because it's a little bit narrower this way and a little bit thicker spine-wise, it's not going to be the best performance cutter, and they make better ones today for specifically that purpose. But it's been a really good sword and really sturdy. It has a real straight temper line on there. The edge is really hard. It's held up to a lot of use and abuse and suffered pretty much no real noticeable damage. The polish is a little bit odd and disturbing. The Shinogiji, the ridge plane and the spine are this super high machine polish that makes it look like cheap stainless steel and or chrome. And then the edge plane is just this really roughed, brushed ugly, dull, scarred up. Yeah, but they told you that's what you were looking forward to. Also, the grinding on the planes is not very well done. There's some gouges and evenness in it that you can feel and kind of see, but it doesn't really hurt the functioning of the sword. It's just not pretty. But like I said, I've had this thing for over 15 years, and I still like it. I still like it quite a bit for what it is. Can I get a better one today? We'll talk about that later. But liking it so much, I figured, me being me, I would take the next step up in terms of risk when it was offered to me. And the next step up was the Practical Plus. And the Practical Plus, well, it's not this. Not quite. It is and it isn't. First of all, I've shown this in another video. This is the guard that came on it. It's a bronze Empire wheel that's blackened, and it's a nice guard. It's well done. It's heavy. It's solid. It's even, smooth. It's a really good casting. But for whatever reason, it just didn't feel good on that blade in terms of the feel and balance. So I made several changes regarding the dynamics. A couple of other immediate changes. Like I said, new guard. And what you've got on here is a brass alloy, the Dragon Tsuba off my original 1976 zinc aluminum Iaito. I love that sword. It was a piece of crap, but this is the last I have of it. And I put it on here, and it's like 1.5 ounces different in weight, but it makes all the difference in handling. So I'm really happy I made the swap. And, it's easy enough to make something like that fit on a different blade. So that's good. The upgrades and the downgrades. The other fixtures, you've got some casting on here, so it's not just plain. The same thing, not on one side, but you get it on just one side and not the other in terms of that fuchi, that collar at the top of the handle. You do get real ray skin. They are just panels. They're nothing fancy. It's not like Big Dode or anything like that. It is double pinned, so you've got a longer tang that's really solid in there. But a couple of things that were really wrong with it, and something that I just didn't like. One thing that I'm still not terribly comfortable with is it has the handle is 1 inch longer. It's a 12-inch handle, and for me, I prefer 10 to 11-inch. I wanted to just go ahead and try the 12-inch to see how I felt about it, and it's just a little awkward. It's more stability, but it kind of gets slightly in the way with maneuverability, just a little bit. But the worst thing about it is not something you're going to be able to see now. First of all, it was wrapped in something that they called synthetic leather, but it looked like somebody painted over some shoelaces. It was awful and spongy and rubbery, and I hated it, and I got rid of it. The other thing is it had what apparently Paul Chen is notorious for. They call it the axe handle, but for me it's like somebody took a 1x2 board and barely rounded the corners. It was very, very straight, very square, very plank-like. And when I was replacing the cord, I figured, okay, I'll go ahead. Since it is a wooden Tsuka, I would reshape it into something that has more of an oval cross-section and a little bit of a taper to it to make it much more comfortable in the hand. Now, what I rewrapped it with is just some cheap synthetic Ito that, it doesn't make pretty diamonds and it doesn't stay put. It shifts around and stuff like that. It's just absolutely, not the best. Not authentic compared to some of my real swords, obviously. But it's what I was used to from the zinc aluminum Iaito and the Marto Spanish-made blades. It's what they came wrapped in, was synthetic silk. Yeah, it's polyester is what it is. But it's good enough for use. It's comfortable. It stays put enough to give you a really good grip, and you're not terribly worried about it getting messed up. It's very cheap to replace and rewrap. So that's not bad. Scabbard. They did coat it in this kind of mottled finish that makes it a little bit more fingerprint resistant. And also, if you do nick it, you can patch it with a little paint and nobody notices. So that's a nice touch. There is a little bit of a reinforcement. I don't think it's real horn, but it has kept the scabbard from splitting, so I can't complain about that. So scabbard is a little bit better than the previous one. The blade, though, is I don't know. It's about 1 inch longer. We're getting up to like a 28-inch blade now. It is a little bit wider, a little bit more of a standard width to it, but it is it's extremely narrow. it's a skinny blade, and it does have a distal taper, but by the time you get up to the tip, it's really thin. But it's not bendy. You can cut with it just fine. It doesn't wrap around stuff and ruin your edge alignment or warp or bend. And I put this through, just like the other one, a lot of hard use. It cuts really well, and I haven't damaged the edge. And the surface is, again, that really weird split between having a super high polished spine and ridge plane, and then the surface of the edge plane is just dull and scarred up and just not pretty whatsoever. It does have a wavy Hammond. The edge is, like I said, hard and sharp. So it's a lighter blade than you expect it to be for the size. But it didn't grow on me quite as much as its predecessor. So I was slightly disappointed. But again, I put it to a whole lot of use, and I can't complain about that. It's not awful. It's not my favorite, but whatever. But still, Paul Chen being the name of the game, I tried going up like one more level with them, and that was the Practical Pro. The Practical Pro, I actually use this sword as a basis for a sword for one of my characters in my writing, and it's kind of designed for somebody who's a little bit more superhuman than me. It had the same problems as its predecessor in terms of having a handle dynamic that was like a piece of blocky wood, so that needed to be reshaped. It was also wrapped in this shiny, slick pleather that just was awful to hold and very slick and flaked off like vinyl. So that went, and again, it got replaced with basically a silk Ito. You're also going back to just a really basic plain bronze fixtures, to the point you can actually see the seam in that Fuchi collar. That's a little bit of a glaring oops. The Same is back to the fake vinyl, and it does have multiple panels with visible seams, and as the glue's yellowed, they really start to stand out. The Manuki are these really kind of ugly fishing-themed castings, I guess, so they're not the best either. But the guard is it's another one of those black and bronze. It's a Dharma wheel, and I really kind of like that. I was attracted to that, so I like the guard. Scabbard, again, you're back to a basic black piano lacquer with nothing fancy in the fittings, though it does come with what is supposedly a horn Koiguchi scabbard mouth, but as you can see clearly in the picture, it's got a big old gouge out of it. That's how it came. And because this one was hard to find, I didn't complain and return it. I figured, I found one, I was happy with it. But again, you're going up in price from $200 to close to $400 to now almost, $500. So is it worth it? Well, a couple of problems with the blade. One, you've got now a 15-inch Tsuka. Again, I was willing to take a chance on a longer Tsuka to see how it handled for me, and the answer is it doesn't. It's just way too long. But it's almost necessary, because the blade also went up to almost 30 inches, and it's much beefier. This thing weighs over 3.5 pounds. It is like wielding a wrecking bar. So you almost need the longer handle just to counterbalance and offset it. So it's a very solid blade. And it has a slight bit of a diamond cross-section that then widens back out just at the tip. It's very slight. It's probably a couple of 30 seconds at most of an inch. It doesn't really take much of the weight out of the blade, so the blade is not the best balance. The finish on it is more extremely machine polished, so it is more chrome looking. Again, it has the wavy Hammond. The edge plane is a little bit rougher finished, but it really is much shinier overall in terms of that artificial buffing wheel polish than its two predecessors, and that's not terribly attractive, but it's not terrible. The biggest thing about this thing is how big it is. It is unwieldy. It's a great sword if you want to work out, or if you're a bigger dude, but not necessarily for me. Now, I did consider, getting some of the more expensive Paul Chen swords that were out there. There are several of them I've drooled over the years, but you're talking about $600, $700, $800, $900 blades. And I was just enough put off by the Paul Chen quality that I never pulled the trigger on them. And I've heard they're perfectly good swords, you know, for the money. And Paul Chen actually makes some really, really interesting and high value things for over $1,000 now. But yeah, I just never took the risk. I don't think I ever will at this point, because for the same amount of money or less, as we've moved forward through time, there are so many more Chinese forges, the upstart forges and the not so upstart forges anymore, that are producing what I would consider actually better quality and better aesthetics for less money. So are Hanwei swords bad? No, they're not bad. Like I've said, I've used the hell out of these, and they've done just fine for what they are. But I feel like I have better choices now, and there's certain forges I've worked with enough, like Liu Sword and Musashi, that I feel comfortable about what I'm going to get from them, just like I do from Paul Chen. So I'm going to go back to those guys, and also considering the prices on some, I'm willing to pull the trigger on some of these other forges I haven't tried yet. You know, investing you know, a couple of $100 tops in something that has a potential to be pretty darn good is worth it. And compared to, again, what I was dealing with in the 70s and 80s and the 90s, wow, I can't complain. Every move is a step up from here. So just a little glance into the not so distant past, but a step in the evolution of the modern katana. And I hope you found this interesting, entertaining, and you know, I hope I see you again.